Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Run Yogi Diaries. This is your host, Santosh Shiva. Over the last 2 years, I've had the privilege of talking to some amazing people, day-to-day people, who are on an extraordinary journey of well-being through endurance sports. I hope you took some possibility back into your lives, took some action, and maybe some inspiration to perspire. In the house today is Dipa Patel. Dipa Patel is a very inspiring individual who has broken barriers, both cultural and gender, to pursue her passion of being an athlete, be an endurance athlete, pursue her passion of triathlons, and then eventually to do her first Ironman. And if you're new to this channel, please do remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on the podcast platforms, leave your comments below and let us know what you think of this conversation, and do like the video if you enjoyed the conversation. Let's dig in. Hi Deepa, welcome to Run Yogi Diaries.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
It's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. We got to know each other because we've done some programs from a common set of programs, and been associated with transformational learning and things like that. And that's how we got to know each other. And it's very fascinating what you've been up to in the domain of endurance sports. So look forward to having that conversation. So let me, maybe do a quick introduction of who you are, and then let me know if I missed anything, and then we'll go from there. How about that?
Sounds great.
Okay. So Deepa, you're a dentist by profession, right?
Oral surgeon, actually, but yes,
Oral
dentist
surgeon. Okay.
first, and then oral surgeon. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you live in the Maryland, Virginia area, correct? In the tri-state area, correct?
hmm Yep, Northern Virginia.
Right.
Yeah.
And you started your endurance journey with bicycling, and you've done a whole lot of endurance, long distance cycling until something happened, and we'll get into that. You
Yeah.
moved to running, and then became a marathoner, and then after that pivoted into triathlons, and more recently been doing Ironman races. So pretty fascinating journey there, and we're going to get behind the scenes on how it all happened. What else? Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. No, that hits all the high points.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. So, Deepa, I think maybe what we should do is do a bit of a flashback, and get into how, why, and what got you into endurance sports.
Yeah, it was funny when you invited me to be here. I was thinking about this for the last several days. And I had actually forgotten something that really got me into this sport, which was I grew up, obviously, I'm of Indian descent and grew up in this country where my parents were immigrants. And, so we always sort of grew up misfits, right? We're sort of Indian culturally, wanted to fit in and be American.
Hmm.
And also, my parents really participated in getting a lot of my cousins and people over here and set up, right, to start a
Hmm.
new life in the United States. And I remember when I think I was probably in dental school, actually, and I have a cousin whose son was about 3 or 4 years old, and he had been falling a lot on the playground. The teachers were really concerned about him. And because they didn't speak very good English at the time, they wanted me to go to Children's Hospital with them. They had a really important appointment for him that they wanted me to help, sort of translate and
Hmm.
explain what was going on. And I will never forget, I was sitting in the room with them, and the doctor came in and he said, "We have some really unfortunate news for you. Your son has muscular dystrophy."
Hmm.
And I don't think they knew at the time what he was going to face, but I did. I was going through my basic sciences, and I knew that my nephew was going to face a short life, a hard life, and that his body was going to slowly deteriorate, which unfortunately it did. He passed away 6 years ago
Mm,
from the disease. And, I just remember thinking to myself, I had always had this itch to to push myself to do more than
mm,
I thought I could currently achieve. But when I found that out, everything I did was for him. The first
mm,
few marathons were for him.
mm,
I raised several thousands of dollars for Muscular Dystrophy Association. I went to some of their fundraising events. Um,
mm.
just because it occurred to me, he was never going to be able to use his body for that. And God blessed me with a great body, one that works, one that's
Yeah,
healthy. And I just wanted to be able to use it to achieve whatever I could achieve in this lifetime.
yeah.
So that's what
Beautiful.
started me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of tragedy in it, but at the same time, it seems to have kind of evoked some kind of inspiration. I mean, you do have these kind of events. A lot of people have these kind of events, and it's not like everyone takes away uh, inspiration from it. So which is fascinating. I'm glad that you took away a positive inspiration from something that was tragic. So that's great. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think we take a body for granted, don't we?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I really do. And our
yeah,
wellness, mental health, well-being, all of that is part of the body being healthy, right? So,
yeah.
absolutely.
I don't know if you've ever had a crick in the neck. Every now and then I do get one, and at that point in life, the only thing that matters is, can that crick just go away? You just want to turn your neck in a way that doesn't pain you, right?
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that's just the irony of it. And then a lot of us, a lot of people out there, just don't take care of their bodies, right?
Right.
And as you get older,
Gets harder.
it gets harder. The body is deteriorating, and which is so unfortunate, right? So anyway, that's this conversation is about. This is what the
Yeah,
podcast is about. It's about bringing that point of view that, hey, as much as you take care of everything else, your wealth, your everything else that you take care of that gives you happiness, body is equally important.
absolutely. Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Terrific. So, well, so then you let's take us to that point in your life when when you picked the bike. How did that come
Right.
about?
Yeah, well, that's so I was a oral surgery resident up in New York. So you know, I had a lot of time. I was on call from home. Um, and I was away from my family. They're all in the Northern Virginia, DC area. So I was alone a lot. And I would see people on these trails on the beach that would just have their bikes out and go out, having a great time. And I thought, I think I want to try that out. So
Hmm.
I would start cycling for hours and hours. I went out at the time alone. I don't know if I do that much anymore, but I didn't, I just wanted to go out. So I would map out my own routes. I went to the cycling store, got my first bike, and then rapidly upgraded to my second one. I remember there were times that when I was a senior resident, I didn't have to be in the hospital, so I would take the beeper with me and I'd be riding with the pager, which we had in those days. I guess it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
that long ago, but anyway, and I would get paged and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, Dr. So and so, yep, I'll be right there." And I was out on my bike, 20, 30 minutes out. Um, but that's what I did. And I did a couple of races on Eastern Long Island.
Hmm.
One where we biked 50 miles. We went from, we took a ferry, went to the island, Shelter Island, biked around, came back. I just caught the bug. I loved it,
Hmm.
just loved
Hmm.
it. So that's how it
And this,
started.
this was what year?
This was 2007, 2008, somewhere in that
Hmm.
range.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
So it's been almost 15 years, right?
Yeah, it's been a long
Yeah.
time.
It's been, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And when you started biking, what was your first bike? Did you go to Walmart and pick up the? Did you
Not
do that?
much, not much better than that. Yeah, it's called a bear. It was a hybrid bike, so it was
Hmm.
like the upright handles, which you can only usually ride for about 20, 30 miles before the neck starts bothering you. So,
Yeah, yeah.
So I pretty much milked out of that one everything I
Mhm.
could, although it still is in my parents' garage collecting
Yeah.
dust. But and then I just rapidly upgraded to a bike that I used for probably 8, 9 years
Mm.
after that. So that one I used for quite a while, and I
Nice.
still have it in the other room. Can't
Nice.
get rid of it.
And how long did you go on your rides? Did you end up doing centuries and multi-stage races? I mean, rides and all that?
Not there, not yet. I think at that time the furthest I had done was 50.
Hmm.
50 seemed like a lot to me at the time, and I
Mhm.
sort of stayed at that until I got into my Ironman time. And then I
Okay.
started building a lot more, but we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So you were cycling, and something, there was a pivot for you that got you into running, right? And when was that?
Yeah, so that happened in 2015.
Hmm.
And it's funny because I think there are these pivotal moments in your life where people think of things that you wish had not happened. They hear
Hmm.
something tragic happen to you and you think, well, I wish that hadn't gone that way, but I wouldn't have this have gone any other way. I mean,
Hmm.
I was going on trips at the time with Trek Travel. So they do incredible trips all over the world, actually.
Hmm.
This was my second trip with them, and I remember they were huddling us all up at they take us from place to place, and so we
Hmm.
were outside of Zion National Park, and they said, you're about to go on a long descent. We had just climbed 10 miles, and if you know Utah, the mountains are
Yeah.
vast, and the
Hmm.
climbs are long, and the descents are long too, so you can get some speed going. So they said, 70% of cycling accidents are men going downhill. So once they
Hmm.
said men, I just sort of tuned out. I figured it didn't apply to me. And, not more than 2 or 3 miles later, I was just having the time of my life. I was going down a very long downhill, and the last thing I remember is I saw some rocks ahead of me that I remember thinking I should swerve to not
Hmm.
go over these rocks. And then I lost control of the bike and don't remember any of the next 30
Hmm.
minutes or so. So I had a pretty significant head injury, concussion.
Ooh.
And when I woke up, thankfully, we had some anesthesiologists on our trip because we were in such a remote place that the EMS took quite a while to even get there.
Hmm. Hmm.
But, I looked down in my hands. I mean, they're all deformed and black and blue, bleeding. Teeth are I was
Yeah.
very, very aware that something pretty bad had happened. And
Hmm.
but like I think that really defined my experience of endurance sports. I didn't get into Ironman until after that.
Hmm.
And you would think, for a couple of years afterwards, it was really hard because I had my parents saying, you shouldn't, you broke your hands. I mean, you broke your
Hmm.
wrists, and, you should not do this. This is for leisure.
Hmm.
This is something
Hmm.
you don't need to do this
Yeah.
for work,
Yeah.
but you do need your hands for work,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so if you get injured again, you may not be able to work. I think you should give up cycling. And obviously they went through all the things I think any parent and family goes through. They were
Right.
terrified because I was out there alone, and they had to help me fly back, and it was just a very traumatizing thing for everybody to go through.
Hmm.
And I had to really reconcile that for myself. I think for about 2 years, I had to really reconcile, first of all, my fear of getting back on the bike,
Hmm.
just in general. But secondly, thinking, well, it is true that this is something I do for fun. And first
Hmm.
of all, is it fun for me still after all those memories? But is it safe? And is it something that, I don't need to do this again. I can
Hmm.
go back, be a surgeon. I didn't even know if I could go back to work for a while
Hmm.
because the injury
Hmm.
was so severe. Um, and I ultimately came back in my own time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And inside of that experience, I saw human beings in a way, sometimes I think when you take risk, you can see things that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. I remember I was alone out there.
Hmm.
And the surgeon that came in to sew my lacerations up, he said, if they don't want to admit you to the hospital, come stay with my wife and I, we'll
Hmm.
get you to the airport in the morning.
Hmm.
And then there was a nurse that was pouring peroxide into my jacket to get all the blood stains out. And
Hmm.
I remember at the time, I was on I was on pain medicine. I was pretty
Hmm.
out of it, but I remember thinking there's kindness everywhere. if you're really willing to, if you're willing to look for it and open yourself up to it.
Mhm.
I was single at the time. I always wanted a relationship. I thought nobody cares about me. And then here's all these
Mhm.
people in my time of need that just really cared about me.
Yeah.
Um, and so I wish I could say I remembered it as a bad experience, but I don't.
Mm.
I don't.
So did you have that feeling at that time, or is this something you reflected later? I mean, this sense of, it almost seems like you had a sense of gratitude in spite of all that stuff that was going on. But was it at that moment, or was it something that you reflected later and figured out, aha, actually that was not such a bad thing
Yeah, I think it was later. I think at
later?
the time, I think we all handle stressful situations differently. For
Hmm.
me,
Hmm.
I delayed my emotional response. I delayed my processing until I was home safely.
Hmm.
Um, but I do remember in the moment, and I think, some of the development programs you and I have both done
Hmm.
teach us that being in the moment where your mind isn't so much doing much and you're just
Hmm.
present.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think I was present to that love and that support that I got from perfect strangers.
Hmm.
But I think later on, I really processed all of
Hmm.
it.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it helped me to just create a narrative of the whole experience that it was actually part of my journey.
Yeah.
And I was always going to be proud of what I went through.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And then what happened? How did you? So you were down for almost 2 years, and what were you doing in these 2 years? Were you just, did you just stop being active, or what
Yeah.
was going on?
Well, that's when I figured it was a good time to start getting into long distance running. It was a lot less risky. A lot less risky. So I did the Marine Corps Marathon. I forget the years. I think it was 2014 and 16.
Hmm.
And then I did the New York City Marathon in 2017. So all that anxiety, I still wasn't quite ready for the bike yet. So I
Hmm.
just kind of pivoted and put that into running.
So who got you into running? Was there someone, was somebody asked you to go run, or did you just one day decide, hey, that, just like that? How did it happen?
It's funny, the running, I can't remember. I just think I saw the Marine Corps Marathon happening one day
Hmm.
in DC. And then I looked more deeply into it and I thought to myself, given everything with my nephew, they had a fundraising entry to get into
Okay.
Marine Corps because otherwise it's a lottery.
Hmm.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to raise money for Muscular Dystrophy Association and register for the marathon. And sort of made sense to me in so many
Hmm.
ways. It was an
Hmm.
inspiration, and it was raising money for a really great organization.
Yeah.
So that's sort of
Yeah.
how I started that. I just set the goal of doing that. And running is definitely not something that I'm good at. I
Hmm.
would not say I'm good at. I'm not fast.
Uh-huh.
It's just I enjoyed it and
Mhm.
it kept me outside and even later during the pandemic,
Mhm.
running saved me
Yeah.
in a dark time for I think a lot of us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So coming back to the post fall phase, you started running,
Mhm.
and then how many marathons did you do in those years?
3 years, 3 marathons, sorry.
3 marathons. Okay.
Yeah.
And so obviously, it may have even been therapeutic for you, right?
Oh,
Just
absolutely.
just being able to get out there and do the running, when it's very funny that it happened to you the other way. For most people, their journey starts with running, and then they switch to cycling because they've had an injury, or that's what happened to me, at least. I used to be a runner, and then I had an injury, and I said I can't stay quiet, so I started doing long distance cycling, and that's how I got into cycling, and then got back into running, of course. um, which is fascinating. And and then how did that evolve, and how did that evolve into,
Excuse me.
bless you,
Yeah.
how did that evolve into triathlons?
I it's funny you asked that question. I cannot recall. I do remember that my program director in my residency program had a picture of himself having done the Lake Placid Ironman.
Mm, mm,
And this guy, I mean, our program was in New York. It was on Long Island. He would drive from New Jersey all the way to Long Island every day, let's like an hour, 20-minute drive both ways. He worked long hours to train us. He was on call on weekends, and somehow he still managed to do the training for an Ironman. And I
Mm.
remember asking him about it, and I think it was always in the back of my mind that this was something I wanted to do. And after the 3 marathons, I figured, well, I've sort of conquered the world of running. I mean, there are
Mm.
ultra marathons and things that people do, um, but I thought that, well, I've done that. Um, and in my gut, I thought I felt like I had abandoned cycling, because cycling
Mm.
was like my child. I loved my
Right.
bike. I loved
Right.
being out there. And I thought to myself, Deepa, you're either going to conquer this or you're going to let it conquer you.
Mm.
And somehow I knew it was time. And I have no swimming background. So then I thought, why not just throw that into the mix?
Mhm.
So I started doing a very short distance, sprint, Olympic, things that were in the pool, so the swim wasn't as
Mhm.
scary, because open water swimming can be difficult for people. It
Yeah.
certainly was difficult for me in the beginning too. Um, so I just started that, and in the beginning, I wasn't a member of any tri club or anything. I had a couple of friends that I said, "Hey, do you want to try to do a sprint together?" And they said, "Yeah, sure, that's not too threatening. Let's try that." And then, I just kind of went from there to the local races that I would find out about on Google.
Mhm.
Then eventually I went on to join a triathlon club, and then that made things a lot easier because, there's a whole group of people going with you. So it's a little less intimidating, to be part of a group that's cheering you on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you have to learn swimming, or did you from scratch? You had to. You had to learn
Yeah,
swimming from
I
scratch.
yeah, I didn't I knew how to swim very
Mm.
basic, but
Mm.
I got an Ironman coach. And what he was local, and then later I switched to a different coach I'm working with now.
Mhm.
And we would send I would send videos of myself to her to coach me in how I was doing. And
Mhm.
then we use Training Peaks, so she'll put in a workout for me to work on the form that she thinks I need to work on, and then I'll either send her the video or just the data from the swim that I did.
Mhm.
And that's how I learned. And I mean, gosh, I improved just in ways I can't even describe in the sport of swimming. But no, I never had any formal swim lessons. I never had any formal running, nothing. I just sort of figured it out in my 30s, with the
Okay.
right coaches, with the right
Yeah. Yeah.
coaches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were running, and especially transitioning from running, bicycling to running, first off, what was preventing you from bicycling? Was that your hand that was stopping you from getting back on the bike?
No, it was my mind.
Oh, just the
Just like
fear.
it's just the fear.
Wow.
I still have some residual wrist pain particularly on my left side,
Mm.
where there was a very weird fracture that couldn't be treated. It had to
Mhm.
kind of heal by itself, but it never really healed right. But no, it wasn't pain. It was that whole analysis. Is this
Mhm.
worth the
Yeah.
risk? Is it fun for me still?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just took some time for me to resolve that for myself.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we all hear, unfortunately, we do hear from time to time of cyclists being,
Yeah.
in really serious situations. It's a grim reality that we sort of all face when we go out there. But I can tell you that being part of the triathlon group made that a lot easier for me because our current triathlon club coach makes sure that he picks routes that are much less busy,
Mm.
and then riding with a group, as we all know, is just so much safer than riding by yourself.
Yeah.
I think knowing that I was taking the steps I needed to take to be as safe as possible, that
Mm.
helped me to get back into it as well.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. I've seen. Last year over here in Houston, we've had some accidents. Someone I know, a good friend, who had a rather bad accident, and she's been in and out of hospitals. And it is an unfortunate thing. I mean, one is accidents because of natural reasons, like in your case, losing balance, and but there are cases of dogs and cases of
Cars.
trucks drivers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah, no, I think it makes sense. I think riding in groups and finding the right group, finding the right route is very important in road cycling. um, Now, in terms of your fitness levels from bicycling to running, right? Did you find it very hard to do the transition because the biomechanics of the two are so drastically different, right?
Yeah, they're different, but well, when in transitioning from the bike to the run, that brick as it's called,
Mhm,
my coach and I just can't say enough about the partnership my coach and I have. She has me still to this day doing a lot of back and forth from bike to run, bike to run, bike to
mhm,
run. In fact, almost every time I bike, I try to do at least 5 minutes off of that because there's some muscle confusion there.
mhm, mhm,
And I'll tell you, for me now, there is really zero issue going from the bike straight to the run.
mhm,
Um, I think the mechanics are different. I think that for me, I'm much stronger on the bike than I am in running.
mhm.
It's just sort of always have been. But there is some leg strength that does, I think, transfer over.
Yeah.
So I would say the best answer I have to that is they're different. What I've learned even recently is cycling. There's a lot of technical things that can
Mm,
make hill climbing, for instance, go a
mm,
lot better for you if you are better with technique. And I mean, I've
mhm,
been doing this now for over a decade, and I still learn things from people on my club about, sitting upright when you're climbing and,
mm,
not being hunched over when you're getting tired and things like that, how to shift to make sure
mhm,
that you're sort of maximizing what the bike can do for you with
mhm,
your shifting. So there's just a lot of things about biking I think that are more technical. I think with running it just comes down to forcing yourself to do it no matter how uncomfortable you feel. you know, I
you know
mean,
uh, if you're I think you would find some of us who come in from the running side of it would say that, hey, running is quite technical too.
well, and there you go. Maybe that's my next
Right,
growth,
right,
right?
right, right,
Is
right, right.
is to take on improving
Yeah,
my run with the technical aspect. Yeah.
yeah, 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 you're right. So there is a lot of nuances of optimizing your cadence and your form and all that stuff, which allows you to, very similar to bicycling. I mean, I'm not a good cyclist. I struggle with cycling. I always find that there are folks that always just zoom past me, and I'm wondering what is that person doing to generate that kind of power. Maybe it's my bike. I blame the bike.
Yeah. Yeah,
Maybe
it's
go.
easy to blame the bike. Yeah, I completely understand. And that's where I think having a coach is really helpful.
Mhm,
And I know we're going to get into talking about something I'm super passionate about, which is getting more women like me into this sport. But having a coach, I'm getting ready to take on a really big race next year that's going to be
mm,
very hilly, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, too. But I'm already thinking about the hill climbing. I'm already thinking about how I'm going to improve how I climb, and getting a power meter and doing some of the hilly rides in my area and
mhm.
making sure that I just get out there and go as frequently as possible. I think that's all it really takes.
Yeah, yeah,
Just go out there as frequently as you can and just do it,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
So, I mean, let's talk about that. What you just you mentioned about women in sports, and especially South Asian women in America in sports. Um, let's talk about it. What gets you out there, and what did you have to deal with, and what maybe stops, in your opinion, a lot of others not to do it.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot too, since we first chatted. And I think it's just like anything. There's a multitude of reasons. I know,
Mm,
and I hope I'm not speaking for other people when they don't necessarily agree. But I know for me, and this sounds kind of some sort of simple, but I was young, and when I was outside, I got dark. And in our
mm,
culture, there's sort of that idea of, well, the fairer the skin you have, the more
mm,
attractive you are. So that was a barrier for me for sure, because even as a child, if you ask my parents, I wanted to be outside all the time.
mm,
I wanted to be, out in the woods, hiking, well, I was just an active kid. So that
mm,
was definitely something I think for me that was a barrier. And then I just, again, like everything, I just had to say to myself, look, if you really love this and if this makes you happy,
Yeah, yeah.
you do have to sort of put that out of your head. I don't know if that influences a lot of other South Asian women, but I know for me it was a definite barrier. Um, I think it's also just partially, what are your friends doing? And,
Hmm.
when you see your friends doing things, I think it's much easier. Not everybody's brave enough to say, I'm going to go and do this race if I'm alone. What if I don't perform well? What if I embarrass myself? What if I make a fool of myself kind of thing? I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah.
common for everybody. That's a human phenomenon. Um, and sometimes I think Indian women, sometimes I don't know that we support each other as much as we could. I
Hmm.
think that sometimes is an issue. And the only other guess I have is maybe this idea that men are still a little bit more dominant than we are, that we are sort
Hmm.
of we have different interests. I know for me, the pressure to get married and the pressure to be, a mother and all these other things that kind of supersede obviously having a great career as well are
Yeah,
more important than what you do for your recreation. So I think that is my best guess.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe the lack of mentorship also,
Mhm.
having somebody that is going to help you and walk you through what can be quite intimidating at first.
Yeah,
Those are my guesses, but I also just think at the end of the day, it's a big question mark because
yeah,
you know it didn't stop me to do it. Somehow, for
yeah,
me, I said
yeah,
I don't care about all that. I'm going to do it anyway.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
those are my best guesses.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think there is some. I mean, obviously, these are speculations. It's not like we've done a study of this and come to a conclusion. But
Yeah,
also, there is a fear, right? There's a fear of the physiology being able to deal with this kind of stress or not. I mean, for example, you sometimes you hear women running during pregnancy, right? I couldn't have imagined that if you talked to me 15 years ago, right? Like when my wife was pregnant, I mean, she was not allowed to take, too much stress. She was, sit down, don't move too much. It's and here now you're seeing women actually running when they are pregnant, and you're like, wait a minute,
yeah,
what is going on? We got this whole thing wrong, the whole physiology thing wrong, right? And the first time someone ran the Boston Marathon, right? The lady, I forget her name.
right. She
Switzer,
was
Switzer. I think
Yes, she was
Switzer is
very
the.
pregnant. I think she wasn't just a little pregnant. I think it
Oh,
was.
really? You're talking about the lady who ran the marathon the first time, pretending to be a man, and she was not pregnant. She was the first
Well,
woman
I
to run the
remember
marathon.
somebody doing a recent story, and I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, that they were actually quite pregnant and did
Hmm.
I don't know if it was Boston, but and she was fine.
Yeah,
I don't think the doctors recommend that though, but but
yeah,
she
yeah,
was really far along and she went ahead and did it anyway. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, anyway, I think the point being that there are a lot of myths around and women for sure, for men too, right? I mean, like your knees is bad for your knees, and you'll especially if you're a runner, and there are a lot of these myths that stop people from wanting to try and
right.
be active, right?
I absolutely agree. I can tell you, for me, uh, this sport has really saved me. 2020 was supposed to be the year I did Chattanooga, the Ironman for the first time. And obviously, we all know what happened in 2020. My tri
Mm.
club continued training until I think July was when they finally canceled it officially.
Mm.
But we were up to 70, 80 miles of biking, running probably 10 miles, and swimming, you know, 3,000 yards or so at that point in a sitting. And, so but, training was I felt it was safe. We're outside,
Mhm.
we're in fresh air. We didn't have to worry as much about contracting the virus at that time.
Yeah.
And, I was a business owner in oral surgery where we're worried about droplets and aerosols
Hmm.
constantly and worried about getting sick. I was living alone. I was really lonely through the pandemic. And, being able to go outside and ride my bike or going
Yeah.
outside and being able to run, just there were so many things I couldn't control at that time. I think we
Yeah.
all felt that way. There was all this happening out of our control. But my going to the pool and swimming, which was
Yeah.
also very hard to find because the pools were all closed for a number of months, and then they would restrict us in how long we could swim because of distancing, so it's like, but I persisted. I was like, no, I'm going to figure this out. I joined a pool much further away so I could get my full hour and a half.
Hmm.
But I had a say in how that all went,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
middle of chaos where I just had no say in what was happening. This was something that I could do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it saved me. It
Yeah.
really did.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I relate to that. I think we have a group of runners, and and what we did during pandemic was we did virtual runs. So we couldn't necessarily meet because of CDC guidelines and stuff, but we would actually run together. But we would be on Zoom calls and and run, and but
Yeah.
outside. And so it made a huge difference. And I saw a lot of people who were struggling. They were not doing. They were not used to doing something like this, and they were struggling with just being stuck in the house and being even at risk of infection and things like that. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely makes sense there. So in terms of your training itself, in general, for um, so you got to running, switched to triathlons, and then went on to do Ironman. And so, what? How are you balancing training? I mean, Ironman training is very intense, right? It takes a lot of time. So, how long do you train in a week, and how do you balance work and family and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's tough. So I think for me, I'm part of a triathlon club, which is
Mm,
great because we have workouts that are organized throughout the week. But I got a coach on top of that, a
mm,
private coach. And
mm,
for that simple reason, if I have an early OR case, I can't get up. I usually get up and work out at 5 o'clock in the morning. Um, but that wasn't practical sometimes because I had to be in the OR by 6:30 or 7 in the morning. So we would organize things around my schedule. And
mm,
she's my coach has gone to Kona twice. She's just a really, really incredible triathlete and athlete in general. So I would say that's the number one thing is for anybody who has that, scheduling concern.
mhm,
But then the other thing is just to make sure that everybody in your life knows what's happening, and they
mm.
need to know this well in advance because those it can take a mental toll when you're feeling like gosh, my husband or my wife is upset that they haven't seen me, or
Yeah.
my business is needing me. I know for me there were days where I would run in the morning, the afternoon, and then do weights in the evening, so I would have 3 workouts in a day.
Mm,
And if I didn't get on the treadmill by 1 p.m., I didn't get the full hour in, and then I was late for the afternoon. But if surgery was
mm,
running over, then I was frustrated. I was flustered. It's a lot of pressure. So I made sure that I adjusted my schedule as much as I was able to, which is great because I own my own practice, so I could
mhm,
come in late if I needed to. I could leave early when I needed to. But I made sure that 6 to 8 months in advance, I let everybody in my life know that this is what's going to be happening.
mhm,
And it's not easy. I mean, when I did the Ironman in 2021, my niece and nephew were at this adorable age. They were 5 and 3 years old. And
mm,
when I would go see my sister, they just wanted to play, and
mhm,
they didn't want me to break away for 2 hours to run because at that
mhm,
point I had to do that long. Um, or do, 4 or 5 hour bike ride. I mean, if I was visiting them, I didn't want to have to do that. So
mhm,
it was difficult. There were times that I'd be on the indoor trainer for 4 hours because I didn't have a chance to go right outside.
mm.
And 4 hours on the indoor trainer is a really long time. That's
It is.
mentally difficult to do.
Yeah.
I did a half marathon on the treadmill once because it was such bad weather outside.
Mhm,
So those are things that are hard to do, and sometimes you just got to trick yourself. You've got to binge watch your favorite Netflix or something
mhm, mhm,
to be able to get through that. But I would say the biggest thing is just having a coach. If you thrive in partnership,
Mm.
having a coach that's there with you so that you can sort of vomit on them when the week is not going
Mm.
well.
Mm.
There were days where she would say, "Deepa, you need to let yourself take the day off today.
Mhm.
This is not going to help you. It's only going to hurt you.
Mm.
Sometimes you get sick, if you're overdoing it. Sometimes you're not eating enough and you need to do more. And
Right.
sometimes it is appropriate to take 3 or 4 days off for your own mental health. So
Mhm.
sometimes with a coach, I think it makes it a lot easier to have the confidence and know that if you take 4 days off, you're not going to lose the fitness that you've gained already.
Yeah.
You
That.
know, so I like that, and just being part of a tri club. Not everyone can
Mm.
afford a private coach, but having a triathlon club where you might have a coach that you can reach out to
Mhm.
on an as needed basis to guide somebody, particularly through the Ironman distance, because it is
Mhm.
just so demanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's my best advice for that.
Yeah. Well said. Terrific. Great tips. What about injuries? Did you have to deal with injuries at all
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
What
I
kind?
mean, that's why earlier on I corrected you because as a surgeon, I was constantly pulling my back and hurting my
Mm.
neck. And particularly, like, just right in here, in the
Mm.
rhomboid region, I was having severe stabbing pain. I mean, it felt like particularly in the transition between the upright position on the bike and the arrow position,
Mhm.
I had a lot of trouble transitioning into the arrow position. So I had to stop during the Ironman and put an icy hot patch on my neck.
Wow.
I had to have dry needling. I had to have acupuncture. I had to do cupping almost every week.
Mm.
So, and that was just to manage it. That didn't even really get rid of it, but
Yeah.
certainly did have that issue. I didn't have any other major things, but
Mm.
maybe a little IT band here and there, but it was mostly for me, my back and my neck.
Mm.
So, and that was brutal. I think even now I lay backwards on a foam roller because if you think about everything, all of us do
Yeah.
this all day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so opening up the posture is really important because you're doing the same thing on the bike
Yeah.
for that long.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the
Makes sense.
injuries took, I would say just managing the neck issue took an extra 2 hours a week of needling
Mm.
and
Mm.
massaging. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So
And what about nutrition? Did you anything? Did you have to change a lot about how you eat and
I had to change
um,
everything,
mhm.
everything. I had the worst eating habits you could even imagine. They say that nutrition is the fourth discipline of the
Mhm.
Ironman.
Mhm.
That if you don't conquer that, you might as well. It doesn't matter if you're the best at the other three. You
Yeah.
will not succeed.
Mhm.
And that's why I hired the coach I have. She's a nutritionist, and
Mhm.
that's what had me pick her. Um, I had to, within 20, 30 minutes of waking up, I had to get something in my stomach, not just
Mm.
coffee, which is what I used to do.
Mm. Mm.
And then, during the 2, 3 hour long rides, we had a certain amount of calories
Mhm.
per hour on the bike that I had to do.
Mhm.
And so, honestly, it got me through the bike. A lot of people are like, how do you get through it without music or
Mm.
distractions? And I said, well, all I thought about is I have to eat this much and I have to drink this much. And
Mm.
that got me through 6, 7 hours because you're just on the bike, you have to eat because
Mhm.
the marathon's coming. And
Right.
if you don't eat enough, you're not going to be able to eat during the marathon because your stomach will get upset.
Mhm.
So I did that. I tried different nutritional supplements to see what my stomach would deal with well,
Mhm.
because that's
Mhm.
another problem if you have, difficulties with GI distress. So that was a huge one. And again, it was just going out there and trying different things.
Mhm.
Also adjusting for heat because
Mm.
some people lose a lot of salt.
Yeah.
And so I was adding just small amounts of salt to my electrolyte mix
Mhm.
to see what was going to be the right combination of because I also get heat related migraines.
Mm.
And so, I have black hair as we all do, and then we're outside and 90-degree plus pounding on the pavement.
Mhm.
And I saw some doctors about that, but ultimately they said, just increase your salt intake.
Mm.
So that was part of the nutrition as well as making sure that I staved off those headaches. So, but the cool thing is I got to learn my body in a way that
Mm.
I think a lot of people never get to do. I know
Yeah.
now what I need to do based on what's going to happen conditions wise.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes
You know.
sense. And what about nutrition, like just regular your food habits? That did you make a lot of changes in that as well? I mean, is there a particular diet you follow or anything that's worked for you?
No, I would say, the protein, it just with muscle
Mm.
breakdown comes recovery. So,
Yeah, yeah.
for people that are vegetarian and, it can be difficult.
Mm.
I do a lot of the core power. So there's 45 grams of protein in one of
Hmm.
those. So within an hour, I make sure I slam down one of those to recover. In fact, I remember the first 100-mile ride I did, I had a flight to Montana to go on a cycling trip that day. So
Mm.
I went straight from, and it was pouring rain. So the last 20
Mm.
miles of my ride, I was soaking wet. I had a change of clothes in the car. I slammed one of those protein shakes and I went to the airport. I didn't even eat anything for like
Mm.
probably 8 7 8 hours after a 100-mile ride, if you can believe it.
Mm.
But because of the protein intake, it kept my body from breaking itself down.
Mm.
So I think that's a really important one. But I'll be honest, to me, the biggest thing was sleep and recovery.
Mm.
Without sleep and recovery, there's no amount of exercise that's going to make a difference for you if you're
Yeah.
if you're neglecting that. And then I think cutting down alcohol is a huge piece of success.
Mm.
By the time I was 4 3 4 months out, I had, not that I drink a lot, but just
Mhm.
really didn't even have a taste for it because I just was exercising so much. All I wanted was water, water, water.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's another big thing, to flush
Yeah.
out the toxins, electrolytes, water, um, recovery. But I think as far as nutrition, as far as I can recall, that and vitamins
Mm.
to just replace what you're taking away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned sleep. I think sleep's very important. And so, do you measure sleep, or how do you know you're getting enough sleep, or is it basically number of hours?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a good sleeper. That's again
Mm.
another thing that I think is next to take on for me. I do the same bad habits a lot of us do. The phone and
Mm.
the TV and
Mm.
not having that, what half hour they say that you should be blue light free before
Yeah.
bedtime.
Yeah.
Um, I would just make sure that I allotted a full 7, preferably 8 hours, even if some of that was me waking up really early, but just laying there for a little bit.
Mm.
I think it was so important to have those times where I wasn't going from this to this to this to this. And the sleep was the only time that I was able to really do that.
Yeah.
So, whatever we got to do to get enough sleep, I almost think a good night's rest is more important than training in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
I know this year I undertrained a lot for the 70.3 distances I did, but my times went down.
Mm.
So it shows me that recovery is far more important than we realize.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I've
Yeah.
been measuring sleep. I just wear my Apple Watch now and go to sleep with it. And, gotten used to it now. Um, but I've seen there are days when you get uh, you know an hour and a half of deep sleep. I mean, deep sleep is on an average less than an hour for me. But even if I, let's say, sleep 8 hours, it's about 1.5 2 hours of deep sleep. And the
Yeah.
other thing I'm getting to measure while wearing something is your rested heart rate.
Right.
If you are recovered, your heart rate seems
Goes
to be
down.
on the lower end of the spectrum.
Yes.
But if you're tired, you're going to have a higher heart rate. I've seen also alcohol increases heart rate, and in fact also reduces your deep sleep.
It does.
Contrary to yeah,
It really does. It makes your sleep quality terrible.
yeah,
And
yeah,
there's also something the Garmin uses called the heart rate variability. I don't
yeah,
know much about
yeah,
that, but I think that is directly correlated to the alcohol and the sleep,
yeah,
particularly the sleep piece of it.
yeah,
So yeah, all of that, it all matters. But it's amazing to me that everybody focuses on the training,
yeah,
but the recovery is just the other side of the hand in
yeah.
my experience.
Yeah, the heart rate variability is a very fascinating. So I've read about it, and basically what I learned is that the heart pumps it doesn't pump at the same rate when it's relaxed. It sometimes pumps once and then it goes off and then it pumps again. So it's kind of chilled out. That's what I
I'll tell
learned.
you, I had that issue when I was training. I remember my brother's a physician, And I remember, I think it was a Friday night, I came home and I was like, oh my God, I don't feel well. And I checked my pulse, it had been a pretty busy day, but my pulse was way down. I mean, it was like in the 40s,
Hmm.
really, really slow. I think it might have even been in the high 30s, to be honest.
Mm,
I think I probably sort of almost pseudo fainted because I hadn't had
mm,
much to eat that day, and it didn't even really occur to me that was what was going on. But I remember thinking, what's going on in there? Like, am I dying?
mm,
I mean, it's like it's not beating fast enough, you know? And that happens because with all this exercise, I was down at 52, 53 for my resting
mm,
heart rate. Which started to feel normal to me. And now when it's high, I feel almost jittery because
mhm,
my heart rate's high. I
mhm,
feel this
mhm.
anxiety because the heart rate's high because
Yeah.
it's just not normally like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
True, true. Yeah, one is the rested the your rested heart rate. The other is the HRV we talked about, which is that your heart beats it's not rhythmic as we think it is. When you're relaxed, your heart rate is a lot more less rhythmic. So there is a variability between each heart rate, is what I learned. So, and when you're stressed, your heart's beating more regular
Regularly.
intervals. So,
Yeah.
which is fascinating, and we don't know of these things if you're if you're not if you're not observing or reading about these things, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, makes sense, makes sense. and
Yeah.
and so the event itself, the Ironman, the Chattanooga one was the first one, right?
That was my first. Yep. And I'm
First one.
planning two for next year. So,
All right, the bug's bitten you. So how was your
okay.
first Ironman? How did that go?
Oh, I just loved it. It was one of the best days of my life. I can tell you, so many things made that day special. I mean,
Hmm.
not the least of which is just obviously all the work that I had put in and cashed in on it, and it was successful for me. It isn't
Hmm.
always successful for, particularly for first time athletes. But just you know, having my triathlon club there, it was
Hmm.
one of our goal races as a team. So we all had each other there, which was really great because there was
Hmm.
just a lot of on course support coming from our club. Um, Having my dad there, I would say,
Hmm.
was one of the most special pieces of this entire thing. Because
Hmm.
as I had mentioned, my parents didn't always understand what motivated me to run around and do all these things.
Hmm.
Um, my dad was with me for the New York Marathon, but this was just a completely other level. And I remember, he told me about where he was going to be on the course. We sort of mapped it out together. But then on the run, so I saw him on the bike course twice, but on the run course, I thought they would be at mile 4 and I didn't see them till 13. So I remember,
Hmm.
somewhere around 10 or 11, I was like, where are you? I'm getting tired. I need you guys. And then they saw me at 13. And I mean, I don't think he's ever been so happy, so proud. He just said, listen, sweet beta, sweetheart. He's like, you
Uh-huh.
just got 13 miles to go. You can do this. And I was
Nice.
crying and I was tired at that point. I was
Hmm.
tired.
Hmm.
Um, but that was what made it special. And then just having my coach, all the partnership my coach and I had created through the whole process. And she said, "You're the one who did all this work." I said, "But I couldn't have done it without you." And
Hmm.
just knowing that we were accomplishing this amazing thing together. Um, and as I crossed that finish line, there's so many thoughts in my head, but also my head was completely blank, meaning
Hmm.
it was just the moment was there and all I could do was just sob and think, I can't believe it. Like I came back from that accident. I came back
Yeah.
from actually I had Lyme's disease too. I didn't even talk about that. During
Hmm.
my year where I did my first 370.3s, I was positive for Lyme disease, which I didn't realize till later, which
Hmm.
was a huge challenge for me to overcome as well. So it was like all of that together. Um, and here I am accomplishing this. The pandemic was behind
Hmm.
us. I kept my
Hmm.
business alive through the pandemic. It was
Hmm.
like everything just kind of came together in that moment. I mean, there's just really no words for.
Hmm.
I'm trying to give words to something that just there's no words for. And I just want everybody to have that experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody
Beautiful.
deserves to relate to themselves as that kind of, hero, to be
Hmm.
honest.
Hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
that's well
amazing.
said. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I like the way you kind of wrapped it up, like a being a hero in your own story, right? Yeah, you don't. It's just your own story, and when you see and you go out and do those things and get to the finish line, it's it's struggle. There's a lot of pain. There's so much training. There are injuries, but when you do that, when you hit that finish line, you're a hero in your own story, and that's just worth it, right? It's all end of the day. That's what makes it worth it.
Yeah.
That kind of explains it too. I said, why do we go and
Yeah.
sign another one, right? Just after that.
You're ready to go again. And they all have different next year my plans are to do Tremblant, which is in Montreal,
Hmm.
or sorry, in Quebec.
Hmm.
And it's been tough to go to the Canadian races with COVID. Their restrictions have been a little harder than ours.
Hmm.
So for 2 years I've been eyeing that one. Mostly because I also love to ski. So this is on a ski resort is where
Oh
this
wow.
Ironman happens. So that you can imagine the hills are going to be pretty interesting. So I'm excited about that. And then I'm going to also do Cozumel, which is down
Yeah.
in Mexico. So that'll be a totally different type of race. But I figured that two in the same year is going to be pretty ambitious goal. We'll see how the year goes.
Yeah.
But that's my plan. And then, I want to make sure that I mention also, and I know we wanted to discuss like more of my goals are to make sure that I mentor South Asian female athletes.
Hmm.
I would say that's probably the biggest reason I wanted to be here and talk is I just want to be a resource for, I'm not a certified coach, but I can
Hmm.
certainly be a mentor to help, just build that
Yeah.
confidence
Yeah.
in our community to see more people like me out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe I'll share your contact details on the show notes. And if people want to ping you and get some advice and talk to you, we could do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer. I'm not a parent yet, but I think just having somebody in your corner cheerleading you
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
when you're a parent, when you're, a sibling or anybody, a friend, coworker, anybody, you just someone who believes in you
Yeah. Yeah.
can propel you to do things you really didn't think you were capable of. So I want to be
Yeah.
able to do that for people.
Yeah. Beautiful. Lovely.
Yeah.
Great. So, we kind of covered quite a bit here, Deepa. We and thanks for sharing the scenes, the behind the scenes of, what you do. Kind of coming to the last part of our conversation where I do have a fun Q&A round with my guests. So you ready for that?
Sure. Yeah, let's go.
All right. Okay, here we go. So the first things first, we're all endurance athletes. At least the world thinks that we are all about just endurance and fitness and well-being, but we have our indulgences. The first one is, what's your favorite junk food?
Oh, that's easy. Cheese puffs.
Cheese puffs.
Cheese puffs. Addiction, I would say.
So is that something you reward yourself after every workout, or how do you do it?
Not every, because God knows if I did that, I'd be in trouble. But I would say that's one of those for the really tough weeks.
Hmm. Stress
Yeah,
eating.
stress eating.
Stress eating. All right. Um, a food that you despise. I mean, you'll never eat it.
A food I despise.
Maybe a dish, something like a dish, or
Yeah, there's definitely things. Salad.
see, that breaks the stereotype. That completely breaks the stereotype. you
Kidding.
know, the general impression is that, oh, these are endurance athletes. They eat a lot of greens and salads, and they don't eat junk food. There, you just broke a stereotype. Great.
Well, maybe I do the endurance sports so that I can eat whatever I want to. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but
I completely agree with you on that.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if all of this is going to be worth it because I can go eat the food I want to eat, right? Absolutely. Sources of inspiration for you.
Oh, wow. I just think anyone who's put themselves on the line to overcome adversity.
Hmm.
I mean, everybody from I was just watching The Crown, Queen Elizabeth, to the mom next door whose child is sick. And, I have a lot of patients like that, moms
Hmm.
raising children with disabilities and things like that. Seeing sometimes there's veterans or people who've lost limbs and they're out there competing, which is a huge inspiration.
Hmm.
Um, there's people out there, is particularly with these races. I see people from all different backgrounds, but
Hmm.
different body types, frankly, that
Hmm.
are,
Hmm.
out there, and they're all an inspiration to me. I know, there have been people in our club with sick children. I mean, real, just things they're dealing with in
Hmm.
life, who
Yeah.
overcome. So I
Yeah.
say anybody who's dealing with something difficult and just refuses to let it break them, and
Hmm.
they cry at night, they sweat, they have a hard time, but then they get up and they keep going.
Hmm. Well said. Very well. Nice one. All right. You're a sunset or a sunrise person from a workout perspective?
Sunrise for sure.
Sunrise. Is that what you like, or is that a arrangement because it works?
I just think there's something neat about being out there when it's still and quiet and everyone else is still
Hmm.
asleep.
Yeah.
And there's just like a moment in the morning when the light is just starting to come out, when it's still quiet.
Hmm.
I enjoy that. I like that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, okay, the last one is a question that I love to ask all my guests is, if we made a movie of your life, what genre would you put it in, and who would you hire to play your character?
Oh my gosh. I don't know how to answer that. In what genre? I would definitely be a comedy, I
Okay.
think. I love making light of myself and making fun of myself,
Uh-huh.
for sure. So I think that would be one. And I would say, one of my favorite movies is Bridget Jones' Diary. I think I would be Renee Zellweger probably, even though she's not my
Mm.
same ethnicity, but I think
Yeah.
I would have somebody like her. I think keeping a sense of humor. I'm glad that we got to that.
Yeah.
Because through all the stuff that we do, you do have to laugh at yourself sometimes. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
had races that haven't gone well, and I just kind of laugh about, gosh, man, that was a dumb mistake, or,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. 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 Well,
That's what I would say about that one. Yep.
good one. Good one. Yeah. Renee Zellweger. It's been a while since I saw her. So you know what, Renee? There's a script coming your way. Maybe you should come back to movies. I haven't seen
Yeah.
you.
She hasn't been on. Yeah,
Yeah.
that series was very funny, if you're familiar with it. But yeah, I think it'd be great.
Yeah.
Maybe Bridget Jones does a marathon or something like that. That would be pretty cool.
Good choice. Good choice.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, that was a great conversation. I loved, how you've gone about your journey, learned a few things in the process, and I'm sure it's an inspiration for others, especially women and women from the South Asian community, to look at what you're doing and say, hey, you know what, this is possible. It has an upside to one's life, and great for sharing that. So, kind of coming to wrap up here. I'll give you the last word. Any final messages? Any last messages? Final message you want to give to our audience and listeners?
Yeah, I think the final message is just don't ever put any limits on yourself, like
Hmm.
this. Just because you haven't gotten here yet is not it's you don't may not see people that look like you there, or you
Hmm.
may worry that you're not going to be the top of the class, but you belong here.
Hmm.
And I just want to, by the time my career in triathlon ends, I want to be able to see, 50, 60 Indian women out there just having a great time.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say, is just this is for you. You belong here.
Yeah.
Anybody belongs here, but in particular that
Yeah. Yeah.
community matters to me.
Yeah.
So that's
All
what I
right.
want to leave everybody with, and I'm happy to be part of anybody's journey. Just feel
Mhm.
free to pass my information along.
Wonderful. Hashtag limitless. Nice.
Limitless.
Yeah. Great. Deepa, thanks for your time today. I wish you all the best for whatever you're doing next year with all those wonderful Ironman races that you've planned. Hope that goes great and you thrive in it. We'll keep a eye out, and we'll be cheering you on. I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of the evening today, and we'll stay in touch.
Definitely. Thank you so much.